Have you ever felt like the better you become as a man, the harder it is to find a woman who actually wants you for who you are? You work on yourself. You build your mind, your body, your mission. You aim to be disciplined, driven, and a protector. All the things you thought women admired. But what if I told you that the very things that make you a great man are the same things that make most women turn away? Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in psychology, warned that the female psyche has a dark undercurrent, an unconscious fear of true masculine power, a fear of men who cannot be controlled or domesticated, a fear of men who stand firm in their truth, even if it makes them dangerous. Because here's the hidden reality. Most women don't want a man who challenges them to grow. They don't want a man who stands so tall he casts a shadow on their comfort. They want safety, predictability, and someone who can be shaped to fit their needs, not someone who reminds them of their own limitations. This is the bitter truth that no one talks about. The very excellence you work so hard to achieve, your strength, your purpose, your unshakable integrity, can become a threat to women who are stuck in their own fears. And if you don't see it, you'll spend years trying to be more gentle, more agreeable, more safe, all in the name of love. But what you're really doing is cutting your own power to pieces. Today we're going to break this silence. We're going to expose the shadow that Jung saw in women, the part that doesn't want a man who is whole, but a man who is manageable. Because if you don't understand this truth, you'll keep giving yourself away and call it love. You've been told all your life that if you just become good enough, you'll earn the love you crave. Be more sensitive, be more supportive, be more patient, and she'll stay. Be the kind of man who never offends, never questions, never claims his own space, and she'll love you. But Carl Jung would have called this a betrayal of your soul. Because most women aren't actually drawn to a man who's always good enough for them. They're drawn to a man who's good enough for himself. A man who's rooted in his own vision, not in her moods. A man who will listen, but not lose himself. Who will support, but never bow. But here's what no one wants to admit. That kind of man is intimidating. He's a mirror. He reflects not just his own power, but her own insecurities, the parts of herself she doesn't want to face. When you're fully alive, fully present, fully grounded in who you are, you become a standard she may not be ready to meet. And rather than rise to meet it, she'll retreat. This is the hidden tragedy Jung hinted at. Most women are conditioned by their own fears. Fears that tell them a man who stands tall will overshadow them. Fears that say true masculinity can't coexist with intimacy. Fears that turn the presence of a great man into a threat, not a gift. So what happens? You start to bend, to soften, to make yourself smaller. You convince yourself that this is maturity, that compromising your edges will keep her close. But each time you silence a truth, you become less of yourself. And every piece you hide to keep her comfortable is a piece she'll never respect. Because deep down, a woman can sense when a man is living in self-betrayal. She can feel it in the way he hesitates, in the way he seeks permission to lead, in the way he holds back his authentic fire. She may never say it out loud, but she'll know. He is not fully alive. And that's the real tragedy. Not that most women don't want great men, but that great men keep shrinking themselves to be wanted by women who fear the weight of their greatness. The world tells you to be a man of strength, but only if that strength is soft enough to be comfortable. You're told to be honest, but not so honest that it challenges her illusions. To be brave, but only if your courage never disrupts her peace. So you become a master of balancing, saying just enough to seem real but never so much that it shakes her foundation. Carl Jung called this dynamic a projection of the anima, the feminine principle that lives in every man. When you're blind to it, you become a slave to it, endlessly seeking validation from women who are themselves trapped in their own projections of what a man should be. And here's the secret. Most women don't even realize they're doing it. They're not villains. They're responding to centuries of conditioning that taught them to equate masculinity with threat and to feel safe only with a man who will yield. So when you stand firm, when you refuse to mold yourself into something safe and domesticated, it's not just about you. It's about every story she's been told about what a man can be. And if she hasn't done her own inner work, she'll see your strength not as an invitation, but as a disruption. This is why most men today feel like they're stuck in a performance. You're playing a role you never agreed to. The reliable partner, the silent protector, the agreeable provider. You're taught to suppress your instincts in the name of harmony, to trade your passion for predictability, to exchange your truth for her comfort. And each time you do, a small part of your soul dies. Because a man who can't speak his truth isn't just withholding words, he's withholding his essence. He's killing the part of himself that was born to stand tall, to protect, to build, to conquer, to create. Most women aren't taught how to hold space for that kind of man. They're taught to control him, to shape him, to make him safe. And you, if you're not conscious, will willingly submit, not because you're weak, but because you've been trained to believe that's what love looks like. But real love doesn't ask you to become less. It doesn't demand you to shrink. It doesn't punish you for being real. It doesn't measure your worth by how much you can suppress your soul. That's why I created the SIM method, a powerful 5-minute practice to reconnect you with your core, break these unconscious patterns, and help you show up as a man who is both strong and whole, no matter who tries to dim your light. You'll find the link in the pinned comment below. Because here's the truth. Most women don't want great men, not because they're malicious, but because they've been taught to fear what greatness requires. They've been conditioned to see your power as a threat, not a gift. They've been told that a man who doesn't bow is a man who can't love. But you were never born to bow. You were born to lead, to feel, to protect, to build, to shape the world with the force of your presence. And if she can't hold space for that, then she doesn't deserve the man you're becoming. There's a dangerous myth that says if you just become the perfect man for her, she'll finally see your worth. So you start adjusting, softening the tone of your voice, weighing every word before you speak, apologizing for things you didn't even know were wrong. You become a master of self-editing, not because you want to lie, but because you've learned that the truth isn't always welcome. This isn't love, it's self-erasure. Carl Jung understood that the masculine spirit thrives on expression, not suppression. The masculine grows in challenge, in clarity, in the friction of truth and reality. But when your partner fears that energy, you start to compromise. First in small ways, like avoiding conflict just to keep the peace. Then in bigger ways, like doubting your gut, or silencing your dreams because they might overshadow hers. She doesn't have to say it directly. It's in the way she withdraws when you're too intense, the way she sighs when you speak your mind, the way she tells you to calm down when you're just being real. Over time, these small reactions shape you more than any shouted demand ever could. You tell yourself, I'm just being considerate. I'm just keeping her happy. But what you're really doing is handing her the keys to your soul and hoping she doesn't drive you off a cliff. Most men don't realize how far they're willing to go for that brief moment of her approval. How many times they'll rewrite their boundaries, their beliefs, even their very character, all for the chance to be told they're enough. Because at the root of this dynamic is the fear that if you're fully yourself, you'll be too much, too loud, too driven, too ambitious, too sexual, too masculine. So you shrink, you fold, you become a man she can manage, and with every piece of yourself you bury, the distance between you and your truth grows wider. Until one day, you're looking at a stranger in the mirror, a man who once had dreams and drive and a fire in his belly, now reduced to a caretaker of her comfort. This is the psychological prison Jung warned about, not built with walls, but with expectations, not enforced by violence, but by silence, because the greatest cages are the ones you build around yourself. The saddest part? Most women don't even realize they're doing it. They're not malicious. They're just playing out their own unconscious scripts, the stories they were taught about what a man should be, how he should act, and what parts of him should never see the light of day. And you, if you're not awake, will play right along. Because you've been taught that her comfort is your responsibility. That the measure of your masculinity is how much of yourself you're willing to kill for her peace. Jung would say that this is the anima's shadow, the feminine in its manipulative, unconscious form. It doesn't scream or demand. It simply shapes you with soft suggestions and quiet withdrawals. And you, wanting to be the good man, comply. You tell yourself, if I'm patient enough, she'll open up. If I'm gentle enough, she'll feel safe. If I love her enough, she'll stop needing me to be smaller. But here's the truth most men never see. She doesn't want you smaller. She wants you safe. Safe for her world. Safe for her ego. Safe for her comfort. And those are not the same thing. A man who lives for her comfort will never know his own peace. Because peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from standing in your truth, even when that truth is inconvenient. The man who is truly at peace doesn't need to be liked. He doesn't need to be understood. He doesn't need to be anyone's version of enough. He knows that his worth isn't measured by how easy he is to love, but by how fiercely he loves himself. And that's what makes him truly dangerous. Not because he's reckless or cruel, but because he cannot be controlled. He cannot be shaped by guilt or shame, or the subtle manipulations of a woman who fears his wholeness. He stands as a mirror to her own insecurities. And that's what most women can't handle. Because the man who refuses to be domesticated forces her to confront the parts of herself she's spent her whole life avoiding. Her own fears, her own limits, her own shadows. And most would rather lose that man than face themselves. So you have a choice. You can keep bending, keep softening, keep sacrificing yourself at the altar of her comfort. And watch as your own life becomes smaller and smaller. Or you can remember what you were before you forgot. You were not born to be a caretaker of someone else's comfort. You were born to live, to lead, to speak, to create, to stand as a force in this world that does not apologize for existing. You will never find peace by trying to be what she wants. Because the truth is, most women don't even know what they want, until they meet a man who refuses to be anything less than himself. So stand up. Speak your truth. Let the chips fall where they may, because in the end, a woman who can't handle your fullness never deserved your devotion. And you never needed her permission to be whole. There's a war that most men don't even know they're fighting. A silent, invisible battle between the man you truly are and the man you've been taught to become. On one side is your authenticity, The raw, unapologetic essence that Carl Jung would say is the foundation of your soul. It's the part of you that knows what you want, that doesn't apologize for your desires, that sees life as a challenge to rise to, not a script to follow. On the other side, approval. The subtle pressure to mold yourself into something more palatable, more polite, more acceptable. The part of you that learned, maybe when you were just a boy, that love was conditional. That a man's worth is measured by how easy he is to live with, not by the fire in his spirit. And every day, whether you see it or not, that war plays out in the smallest choices you make. Do you speak your mind, or do you swallow it to keep the peace? Do you pursue what sets your soul on fire, or do you compromise it for someone else's comfort? Do you dare to stand out, even if it makes her uncomfortable? Or do you fade quietly into the role she wrote for you? Jung warned that the danger isn't in external enemies. It's in the shadow within. The part of you that fears being seen as too much, too selfish, too intense. The part of you that's been told over and over that a good man is a quiet man, a safe man, a man who exists only to hold space for someone else's story. But here's the truth. Most women don't want to hear your story if it doesn't center them. They don't want to feel the weight of your truth, the complexity of your vision, the strength of your boundaries. They want your devotion, but not your independence, your support, but not your sovereignty. And the cost of that imbalance is always paid by you. You start to question whether your own dreams are too much. You start to believe that your power is a problem that needs to be managed, not a gift that needs to be shared. You start to confuse love with self-abandonment and call it compromise. But the more you give away to keep her comfortable, the less of yourself there is to give. Until one day, you realize you're living in a story that was never yours to begin with. Jung believed that the only way out is through the shadow, to face the uncomfortable truth that real love doesn't ask you to be less, that a woman who can't hold space for your whole self isn't a partner, she's a warden. And that's where your choice lies. Will you keep trading authenticity for approval? Will you keep shrinking to fit inside her idea of love? Or will you finally see that the war you're fighting is one you were never meant to win? Because the only battle worth fighting is the one to reclaim your soul? The truth is, most women don't want great men. Not because they're evil, but because they've been taught to fear what greatness demands. But you were never born to be safe. You were born to be whole. At first, it seems harmless. You think, I'll just bend a little. I'll be more understanding, more gentle, more agreeable. I'll show her I can be what she needs. You tell yourself it's love, that molding yourself to her comfort is proof that you're not like the others. Proof that you're strong enough to adapt, patient enough to hold her storms. But as Carl Jung would warn, every time you bend away from who you really are, you're not just compromising, you're betraying the very core of your masculine spirit. Because bending becomes a habit, and habits become character. Before you know it, you're not just adjusting, you're erasing. You're not just compromising, you're losing yourself piece by piece. You stop saying no, you stop asking for what you want, you stop dreaming as big as you used to. You stop fighting for your vision because you're too busy fighting to keep her from leaving. And here's the most insidious part. She won't tell you to stop. She'll smile. She'll thank you. She'll say how good you are, how safe she feels. Because in her world, a safe man is a man she can control. A man who trades his own power for her security. A man who becomes a reflection of her needs, not an expression of his truth. And you'll feel it. The dull ache in your gut every time you swallow your voice. the quiet resentment that builds every time you step over your own boundaries, the shame that whispers in the dark, telling you that you've become exactly what you swore you'd never be, a man who lives for her comfort, not his own truth. Jung believed this is the fate of the unconscious man, the man who doesn't know his own worth. He'll spend a lifetime seeking approval from women who can't handle the fullness of his power. Because to stand tall, to claim your life, to be unapologetically who you are, that takes courage. Most people will never understand. And most women, if they haven't done their own work, will never invite. So they'll settle for a version of you that doesn't scare them, a version of you that doesn't challenge them, a version of you that keeps them comfortable and keeps you contained. And you? You'll convince yourself that's enough, that if she's happy, then you must be whole. But every night, when you're alone with your thoughts, you'll feel it, that quiet voice asking, what happened to the man I used to be? The man who was hungry for life. The man who didn't need permission to speak or act or dream. The man who didn't see love as a contract of submission, but as a dance of equals. Most women don't want great men because greatness demands presence, demands honesty, demands depth. And that's terrifying for someone who only knows how to play it safe. So here's what Jung would whisper in the darkness of your doubt. You were never born to be what she wants. You are born to become who you're meant to be. A man who can hold space for her, yes, but who never forgets that his own life, his own soul, is his first and final responsibility. A man who can love her fully, but who will never trade his truth for her comfort. Because the price of becoming who she wants is the loss of who you are. And no woman, no matter how beautiful, no matter how captivating, is worth that. Every man who's tried to twist himself into the perfect shape for a woman knows this truth. No matter how much you bend, it will never be enough. You'll become more sensitive, and she'll say you're too soft. You'll become more driven, and she'll say you're too cold. You'll become more patient, and she'll ask why you're not more assertive. You start to see the pattern, not in her words, but in your own exhaustion. The way you lie awake at night, replaying every conversation, every choice, every small moment of failure in her eyes. But here's what Carl Jung would say. This isn't about her. It's about the wound you carry, the belief that your worth depends on her approval. Because deep down, every man knows what it feels like to be judged for wanting more than she's willing to give, to be shamed for having standards, for refusing to be tamed. And the irony is that no matter how much you shape yourself to her desires, she'll never see you as complete. Because the moment you trade your authenticity for her comfort, you're no longer a man she can truly respect. Jung called this the shadow of the anima, the part of the feminine that punishes a man for being too much, yet secretly yearns for his fullness. She wants to feel safe in your strength, but she fears what that strength might demand of her. So she tests. She withdraws. She challenges. And you, wanting so badly to prove your worth, mistake these tests for signs of love, when they're really signs of her own inner chaos. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most women don't want to see your greatness because it means they have to confront their own limits. And if they're not ready to rise, they'll try to pull you down instead. Not always maliciously, sometimes quietly. Sometimes in the language of compromise or teamwork or balance. But the result is always the same. You become less so she can feel more secure. But here's the other truth Jung would have you remember. You were never born to be enough for someone else. Your worth isn't measured by her comfort. Your value doesn't live in her praise. and your life isn't here to fit inside the box of her expectations. The moment you see that, really see it, you're free. Free to stop playing a role. Free to stop apologizing for your hunger, your ambition, your truth. Free to stop shrinking just to be held. Because the man who lives for her comfort will always feel like he's not enough. Because he isn't. Not because he's lacking, but because he's not being himself. And the moment you decide to stop playing that game, you step into a new world. One where you're no longer asking for permission to be who you are. You're claiming it fully. Finally, without apology, you've seen the pattern. You've felt the cost. You've lived the silent war between what she wants and who you are. Carl Jung said the only way to break free from the unconscious is to make it conscious, to bring to light the patterns you've been repeating without knowing why. And in this moment, you see it. The truth that most men spend a lifetime avoiding. No matter how much you give, it will never be enough, because you were never meant to be enough for her. You were meant to be enough for yourself. This isn't about rejecting women. It's about refusing to reject yourself. Because the moment you decide to live for your own truth, to stop apologizing for your power, your hunger, your vision, you become untouchable. Not in the sense of being distant or cold, but in the sense of being complete. A man who doesn't need her permission to stand tall. A man who doesn't ask for approval to speak his mind. A man who doesn't apologize for existing in the fullness of his strength. That's the man she will never control, and the man she will never forget. So here's the final provocation. Stop asking if you're enough for her. Start asking if she's ready for the man you're becoming. Because the world will tell you to be quiet, to be soft, to be tame. But your soul was born for more. And the moment you stop living for her comfort is the moment you start living for your freedom. And that's the only game worth playing.